we can draw a little bit of a conclusion to the relegation battle, Stefan. Two results yesterday and today that stand out. Let's go to the crazier one first. Union Berlin against VfB Stuttgart decided in true German efficiency standards to pack 90 minutes of football into 45 minutes of football. 8 goals in 45 minutes. Yes, injury time and all that. You know what I mean. It's a Bundesliga record. Never before in history have there been 8 goals in one half. I think it wasn't until the 4-4 that there was a player that had scored more than one goal either. So the first 7 goals were from 7 different guys. Illich then scores a brace, right? And then both these teams decided in the second half, well, that's enough. Let's shut it down. I also wrote it down. The XG after the first half, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but it was below 0. It was below 1 for both clubs on 4 goals. There were some bangers in there. Undav with the first one, right from distance. Then Milo was like, okay, hold my beer. And then Querfeld said, all right, you guys, what you guys can do, I can do even better, and scored another one from distance. Some unbelievable goals in the first 45 minutes. And really crazy first 45 minutes and the second 45 minutes that we're probably to forget. Yet historic, and also a very big result for Union Berlin, who are now 13 points clear of the promotion relegation spots. Steffen Baumgart has done it. I wouldn't go quite absolution on Baumgart. I'm still not 100% sold, Stefan. I still think that it was a reactionary move at the time that now has seemingly worked out for Union Berlin now that they've avoided relegation. I'm still not sure this is the manager you want to build your club on going forward. I still think someone like Bo Svensson would be more visionary. But here we are. I think, when the dust settles in Köpenick, there will still be questions to be asked on what they're going to do with the club. But, first and foremost, staying in the Bundesliga for another year. And that is important for Berlin as the capital, that they have a club. But it's also just great to see this Union Berlin story continue in the German top flight.
Yeah, and they deserve full credit for it. And as you said, it's going to be interesting how things play out with Steffen Baumgart in the summer. I said on social media after on Saturday, I was like, look, I hold my hands up. I didn't think he would be able to do it. He's had a decent career as a head coach, but he strikes me as a bit of a yo-yo head coach, or the head coach of yo-yo clubs, where he's just the kind of guy who's perennially in charge of these teams who struggle to stay in the league. Obviously, can do a decent job of getting them promoted, but I didn't think he'd be the man to kind of step in for Union Berlin for a number of reasons. But I said, fair play to him. I can't fault him. I think I checked last night, so before the Sunday games, since he stepped in, Union have been the 10th best team in the Bundesliga. So he's done more than enough here, and I think this game was a good example of what they've done. He's given them back this fight. He's given them something to fight for. They're a team who just do not say no. They don't give up. They have now added a little bit of attacking flair, but they are quite dogged defensively as well. I know it's a silly thing to say. They've conceded 4 goals, but the manner in which they kept coming back into this game. I mean, I know they obviously went ahead and then they kind of threw away a 2-goal lead. But to come back into that game, by the way the game finished, or the first half finished, sorry, with Illich obviously scoring that 4th goal, I think summed up Union Berlin tremendously well. And I think it was a good game to illustrate where these two clubs are right now, because on the one side you've got Union Berlin, who are fighting for every single inch, doing everything they can, obviously still very flawed, can't defend everything, struggle to keep a clean sheet. At times, Stuttgart passed through them like, peak Barcelona, it felt like. And, it felt very much like a top 6 side versus a relegation threatened side. But Union just kept going for it. And particularly with the set pieces, they were just tremendous. Now, maybe Union are just amazing at set pieces. Maybe they've got a set piece coach like Arsenal who just knows exactly what he's doing. I didn't get that impression watching those set pieces. To me, they were very straightforward crosses into the box. They weren't even like great. They weren't at speed. They weren't whipped. They were just straightforward ones. It just felt like this Union Berlin players every single time just out wrestled Stuttgart and got on the end of those balls and fired them into the back of the net. Um, but then equally, you had Stuttgart who scored a tremendous outfield goal from Undav, a tremendous, out of the box goal, a tremendous out of the box goal from Milo. Fulric scores a lovely finish, probably one of the best finishes you'll have of the season, which hasn't been a great season, I must admit. And so where you had a Union Berlin team who were very dogged, very hard working, fighting for every inch, you had a Stuttgart team who very well put together, very technically proficient, scoring wonderfully crafted shots, well placed shots that the goalkeeper just could not get anywhere near, but couldn't defend to save themselves. And this has been Stuttgart's problem for the entire season. They obviously lost both key central defenders. They lost more players than that as well. And we've talked about this throughout the season, really, but they basically brought in like 4 or 5 central defenders or promoted some that they had. A lot of young guys in there. Chabot's kind of considered like the kind of, I think his nickname is like literally like the bouncer or something, if I'm not mistaken, at
Yeah.
Stuttgart. I'm not entirely convinced by him by any means. I'm not convinced by that Stuttgart defense by any means at all. And I think if someone was to ask me, like, I need to watch one football match of Stuttgart's to sum up the season, you could pick the games against Juventus, you could pick the games against Real Madrid, whatever. But I think this game sums it up perfectly well because they have the capacity to play beautiful football. They have the players to score beautiful goals from 20 or 30 yards out. But they can't defend to save themselves. And actually, I did check this just before we started talking about them. They have the 12th worst defensive record in the league. So, well, I guess what I mean by that is only 6 teams have conceded fewer goals than them in 2025. And I think that completely sums up why they've just kind of plummeted down the league table. And I think that has to be Sebastian Hoeneß's key concern going into the summer transfer window. They've got plenty of firepower up front. They've got guys like Milo, Furik, Undav, even like Demirovic. These are all guys that top 4 sides would love to have in their team. They've got so many players who could easily play for a top 4 club. But when you look at that defence, it's few and far between. And yeah, I know Mittelstadt's obviously, a German international. But aside from that, and, I do kind of probably include Alexander Nobel in this, who hasn't had a great season by any means. They really have to fix what's going on there in defence if they kind of want to push on next season because this game was a perfect example of why Stuttgart have struggled. But equally, a perfect game of why Union Berlin under Steffen Baumgart have really turned things around. So a great game to watch at 7 a.m. when I was burping my newborn son.
Yeah, it was a nice distraction, I guess, for people busy. I actually looked up this XG in the first half. It was 0.97 to 0.68 in Union Berlin's favor, that's mind-boggling how they managed to score 4 goals on that. But it does tell you a bit about what you just mentioned about Stuttgart's defense, and I think, I do still think that Stuttgart plays some of the best football in Germany. It's just the problem is that the defensive heart was ripped out of this team last season. And yeah, maybe Ito wouldn't have been able to play this year anyways, right? With all the injuries he had since he's joined Bayern Munich. And so maybe the story would have been the same even if he had stayed. I do think Finn Jelch is the real deal. I think he's a tremendous signing, but you have to remember he's only 18, right? And he's going to take his time to gel in this lineup. Chabot, as you mentioned, is a bit of a project. And then the other players, whether it's Ramon Hendricks, Aldahil, the Luka Yarchages, these are all projects. And so, it's going to take some time. And the commentating team of the Union Berlin game, I can't remember who the co-commentator was, but he pointed out that Stuttgart have an avenue to get to the Europa League through the DFB Pokal. There's risk in that. You have to beat Arminia Bielefeld first. I suspect they will beat Arminia Bielefeld. We've seen this in the past that when lower division sides do finally get to Berlin, the occasion sometimes gets to them. Although Kaiserslautern gave it a real good go last year, right? So I think, this is also what's happening here a little bit. That when a team like Stuttgart, and we've seen this with Frankfurt over the years, when they realized the best avenue to back to European football was a cup competition, that they let it go a little bit in the league. And I think that's what's happening here. And the second half was a little bit evident of that, in terms that Stuttgart they just didn't really seem to press anymore. And yeah, and 2 extra points gets them to 43. I guess they're still within a shout of European football, but we all know what's going on. And so I think one team really wanted the point to stay in the Bundesliga, and the other team was kind of maybe content with saying, okay, fine, this battle is fought, and we are both happy with the stalemate. And so I think that's where we are at with Stuttgart at the moment. And yeah, again, Union Berlin, for them, this is tremendous. Another year in the Bundesliga means another year where they can develop the club, can grow in one of Europe's biggest and most prominent cities. They have huge plans for this stadium. Those can now be, they're more likely to go through when they're playing the Bundesliga, right? They can get this club back on track. The potential there is significant.